I was 16 when my stepfather threw me out. He didn't bother to whisper or soften the blow. He stood in the doorway with his arms folded and said, "You're not my blood. You're not my problem." Those words cut deeper than anything I'd ever heard. My chest tightened like the air itself had turned against me. My name is Ethan Ward. Back then, I was just a skinny kid with a backpack, few clothes, and no plan. I'd spent years chasing the approval of Colton Brigg, the man who married my mother, but he never once called me son. To him, I was a reminder of the father he erased from our lives. That night, my mother, Mara, stood behind him, clutching her sweater, eyes full of tears. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Ethan. Please forgive me." I wanted her to fight for me, but I also saw her fear. She'd lived in Colton's shadow too long to break free. I walked out into the night with nothing but my bag and the silver locket she'd given me as a child, the only piece of my father I thought I had left. The door slammed shut, and with it, the last shred of home vanished. I was 16, standing in the cold, abandoned by the only family I knew. From then on, I lived on the streets, scavenging, sleeping under bridges, begging strangers for spare change. Every night the same question haunted me. Why had my real father left me? The bitterness of that question became my only companion. Life, though, twists in ways you can't predict. 14 years later, at 30, I was washing dishes in a rundown diner when a man named Silas Crane walked in. His first words, "I've been searching for you for 14 years. He carried an envelope that rewrote everything I believe about myself. Inside was a bank statement showing $73 million in my name and a letter from my biological father explaining why I had to be hidden. The night Colton threw me out hadn't been an ending. It was the beginning of a story I never saw coming. But even before that night, my life had always been unsteady. I was born in a small Ohio town, raised by my mother, Mara. She was gentle, but sadness lived in her voice. Whenever I asked about my father, she'd only say, "He loved you, Ethan, but he couldn't stay." As a child, I believed her. As a teenager, it felt like a wound that wouldn't heal. When I was 10, she remarried. That was when Colton Brigg entered our lives. He ran an auto yard on the edge of town, the kind of man who wore oil-stained shirts even to church. At first, I thought maybe he'd be the father figure I needed. Instead, he called me only boy, not Ethan. Never son. At dinner, he'd bark, "Boy, did you finish your chores?" When I brought home a math grade he didn't like, he'd sneer, "Boy, you'll never amount to anything." Once I asked him to call me Ethan. He set down his fork, glared at me, and said, "You earn a name in my house." My mother sat silent, staring at her plate. That silence became the rhythm of our lives. Living with Colton was like walking a tightrope. If I worked hard, he found flaws. If I tried to stay out of his way, he called me lazy. The only comfort came late at night when my mother would sit on my bed, tuck in the blanket, and whisper, "You're stronger than you think, Ethan. Just hold on." By 15, I dreamed of leaving. I worked odd jobs, mowing lawns, stocking shelves, half my pay going to my mother. Colton still demanded more. He wanted me to quit school and work full-time in his yard. "What good is algebra when there's real work to be done?" he snapped. I told him I wanted to finish school, maybe go to college. His face twisted with rage. To him, my dreams were nothing but foolishness. His resentment grew heavier by the day. He slammed doors when I came home, muttered insults, told neighbors I was just a burden. Everyone knew, but no one dared confront him. I lived knowing I was only tolerated because of my mother. Once I brought home an essay with excellent work written in red ink. My mother's face lit with pride, until Colton snatched it, scoffed, and tossed it in the trash. "Words won't put food on the table," he said. I wanted to fight back, but the words never left my throat. That was my life before he finally cast me out, a boy trying to exist in a house that never wanted him. My mother's quiet encouragement kept me alive, but I knew deep down Colton was waiting for the day he could be rid of me. Those years hardened me. They taught me to work, to endure without affection, to rely on no one but myself. By 16, I was standing on the edge, either stay and lose myself under Colton's control, or resist and face the fallout. I didn't know it then, but that choice was already rushing toward me, the choice that would tear me from the little safety I had, but also shape everything that came after. The breaking point came the summer I turned 16. While other kids were talking about part-time jobs or trips to the lake, My reality looked nothing like theirs. Colton made it clear he expected me to work full-time in his auto yard. To him, summer meant long days of stripping parts, welding frames, and sweating under the sun. One evening at dinner, he looked at me across the table and said flatly, "Starting Monday, you're mine from sunup to sundown." I tried to push back. "I want to keep working at the corner store, too," I told him. "I need money for school supplies. Maybe even for college applications." He slammed his fist against the table, so hard the dishes jumped. "College? Don't make me laugh. You'll either break your back doing real work or end up a bum." My mother froze with her fork halfway to her mouth, eyes fixed on her plate. I wanted her to defend me, but fear kept her silent. The argument didn't stop that night. For days, Colton repeated his ultimatum. "The yard opens at 6. You'll be there at 5:30. He left notes on the fridge, came to the store where I worked, and barked at my boss that I was wasting time stocking shelves. I knew what defiance meant in his house, but I couldn't let him crush what little hope I still carried. I wanted more than grease-stained hands and his angry voice ringing in my ears. The final showdown came on a thick, humid Thursday night. Cicadas buzzed outside. The air reeked of gasoline clinging to Colton's work clothes. I told him again that I wasn't quitting school or my job at the store. His face reddened. He jabbed a finger at the door. "You think you get to choose? Not in my house. You either work for me, or you don't live here." My stomach twisted, but I held my ground. "Then I don't live here." His lips curled into something between a sneer and a smile. He leaned in close, whiskey on his breath, and delivered the words that would haunt me for years. "You're not my blood. You're not my problem." It felt like a death sentence. My mother broke down, grabbing his arm, pleading through tears. "Colton, please. He's just a boy." He shoved her off, snatched my backpack from the corner, shoved it into my chest, and pushed me toward the door. She whispered one last time, "I'm sorry, Ethan. Please forgive me." I wanted to run to her, cling to her, but the door slammed shut between us. Outside, the air was sticky and heavy. I had nothing but a half-filled backpack and the silver locket she'd given me as a child. That was the night my childhood ended. My first bed was the damp ground under the railroad bridge on the edge of town. Every car that passed made me flinch. Hunger gnawed at me, but worse was the loneliness. I kept replaying Colton's words, "Not my blood, not my problem." If even my mother couldn't protect me, who would? The weeks that followed were nothing but survival. I learned which grocery stores tossed expired bread, which gas station clerks would hand me a sandwich if I swept the lot, and which churches left their doors unlocked so I could slip inside and rest. I held on to my corner store job as long as I could, but showing up in wrinkled clothes with no address made people notice. My boss finally pulled me aside. "Ethan, you can't keep coming in like this. Customers talk." He handed me my last paycheck, and just like that, the only steady thing in my life was gone. Nights, I found other kids like me, runaways, throwaways, cast-offs. We shared scraps of food and traded stories about the families who had broken us. One boy said his father tossed him out after catching him stealing. A girl said her stepmother locked her out and never let her back in. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. But that didn't make the wait easier. Every day was a fight to find food, to find somewhere safe to sleep, to silence the voice whispering I was worthless. I carried my mother's locket everywhere, gripping it when despair threatened to drown me. If she couldn't save me, maybe I could save myself just by surviving one more day. Bitterness toward my real father grew like fire in my chest. Why hadn't he been there? Why had he left me with a man who despised me? Every unanswered question became fuel for my anger, and that anger kept me alive. At 16, I was living in alleys and under bridges, but I refused to break. I didn't know then that my suffering was only the beginning, and that the truth about my father had been waiting for me all along. By 30, I had lived more lives than I ever imagined. I drifted from town to town, hitchhiking, walking, taking whatever work I could find, harvesting crops, cleaning motel rooms, cashing in bottles for coins. Winters nearly killed me. The cold sank into my bones until I wondered if I'd ever feel warm again. Stability always slipped away, except for one job. A diner in Kentucky, a squat brick building off a county road. Truckers came in at dawn for coffee and eggs. Families filled the booths after church. I was the dishwasher in the back, surrounded by towers of plates and the sharp sting of soap and grease. The pay was barely enough for a tiny rented room above a hardware store, but to me it was luxury. A bed, four walls, enough food to quiet the hunger that had stalked me for years. The routine was numbing, but it was something. I clocked in at 6 each morning, worked until the dinner rush ended, and dragged myself home with cracked hands and an aching back. Still, I told myself at least I wasn't on the street anymore. But I was invisible. People passed me by without a glance. My only conversations were short exchanges with waitresses dropping off dishes. I existed, but I wasn't seen. Until one late autumn evening, when the doorbell over the diner jingled and a voice asked, "Excuse me, is there an Ethan Ward who works here?" I froze. No one ever asked for me. No one outside of the manager even knew my name. I stepped out from the kitchen, drying my hands on my apron. At the counter stood a tall man in his 50s. His gray hair was slicked back, his eyes sharp and trained, his dark coat neat, a leather folder tucked under his arm. "That's me," I said carefully. He nodded. "My name is Silas Crane. I've been searching for you for 14 years. The diner went quiet. Waitresses exchanged confused glances. A customer lowered his coffee, staring at us. My chest tightened. No one searched for people like me. "Why?" I asked. Silas opened his coat, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid it across the counter. "Your father left instructions. He wanted you found, no matter how long it took." The world tilted under my feet. I gripped the counter to stay upright. "My father," I whispered. "I don't even know who he was." Silas's expression softened. "That is about to change." I stared at the envelope. For years I had cursed the man who abandoned me, convinced he was a coward, a ghost who never cared. And now this stranger claimed he'd left something for me. Fear and anger wrestled in my chest. Part of me wanted to rip the envelope open on the spot. Another part wanted to throw it away and walk out. I had survived 30 years without him. Why should I care now? But curiosity won. My hand shook as I picked it up. The weight felt heavier than paper should. "Why now?" I asked. "Because he knew timing mattered," Silas said. "Because he knew the truth would only make sense once you had lived enough to understand it." His words hung in the air, confusing but impossible to dismiss. I looked down at the envelope, my name scrawled in handwriting that wasn't my mother's, wasn't mine, but was meant for me. I tucked it under my arm, unable to open it with strangers watching. My mind raced with questions I had buried for years. Who was my father really? Why had he stayed away? And what could possibly be inside this envelope that had taken a man 14 years to deliver? That night I sat in my small rented room, the envelope on the table in front of me. I stared at it for hours, afraid to break the seal, because I knew whatever it contained would change everything. The life I had built, the identity I had carried, even the anger that had fueled me. At last, with my hands trembling, I slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a thick stack of papers. On top was a bank statement. At first my eyes skimmed over the numbers without understanding. Then I saw the balance. $73 million. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, stared again. The number did not change. My breath caught. For a moment I thought it had to be a mistake. How could a man who had abandoned me, who left me to be raised by a cruel stepfather, leave behind this kind of money? Why would it have my name on it? Beneath the statement was a handwritten letter, the paper old, the edges yellowed, my name written in bold strokes. "Ethan," it began. "My son, I know this letter will reach you long after I am gone. There is no way for me to know what kind of man you have become, but I have carried you in my heart every day of my life. If you are reading this, it means the time has come for you to know the truth. For the first time in my life, I was reading words from the man who had given me life. He wrote of danger, of enemies made through success, of betrayal by those closest to him. When my mother became pregnant, he realized anyone near him would be at risk. To protect us, he stepped away. He said it was the hardest choice of his life. He provided for my mother, but his presence would have put us both in danger. He had arranged for money to be set aside in trust, and for Silas Crane to find me when the time was right. I had told myself for years that my father was a coward. Now I was learning he had left not out of neglect, but out of fear for my life. I wiped tears from the page to keep reading. "I never stopped loving you, Ethan. You were not abandoned. You were protected. Those words carved into me. For so long I had carried the weight of being unwanted, of being a burden. Now I held proof that I was loved enough to be sacrificed for. The money seemed secondary compared to that truth. I thought of the locket I had carried in my backpack for years, believing it was my father's presence. In reality, it was my mother's fragile love. Now, at last, I felt both loves settle in my heart. My mother's broken but real, my father's distant but determined. I cried without restraint. All the nights under bridges, the hunger, the fury at a man I thought had thrown me away. It poured out in wave after wave until my chest ached with release. Hours later, I read the letter again and again. Each time the words reshaped me. Colton had cast me aside. My mother had been too afraid to shield me, but my true father had carried me in his heart from a distance. I understood now why Silas had waited 14 years, why he had stood so steady in that diner. He had been guarding this truth for my father, and now he had fulfilled his promise. I stared at the statement one more time. $73 million. It felt unreal. I thought of the boy I had been at 16, shivering under a bridge, clutching a locket, wondering if life would ever get better. Now all that suffering stood beside a fortune I could not comprehend. But joy was not the only feeling. I grieved for the years I had lost. I felt anger at my mother for never telling me. I felt confusion about what I was supposed to do with this inheritance. Yet above all, I felt something I had not in years, hope. My father's letter had given me back my name. I was Ethan Ward, son of Jonathan Hale, a man who had sacrificed presents for protection. I visited my mother first. I had avoided her for years, bitter that she hadn't defended me the night Colton threw me out. When I stepped into her small apartment, her hair was gray, her hands trembling. "Ethan," she whispered as if seeing a ghost. I told her, "You never lost me, Mom. I just needed to understand." She broke down, apologizing over and over. She admitted she had searched for me, but after years without success, she believed I was better off without the mother who had failed me. I told her I forgave her, told her about my father's letter. For the first time since childhood, I felt like her son again. Forgiveness gave me peace, but I knew I couldn't stop there. I thought of the kids I had met on the streets, the ones who had shared scraps of food, the ones who had disappeared without a trace. I could not change my past, but I could change someone else's future. I used part of the inheritance to start a foundation for homeless youth, shelters with warm beds, hot meals, counseling, job training, and the support I had desperately needed at 16. I visited often, listening to their stories. Some looked at me in disbelief when I told them I had once been where they were. "You don't look like it now," one boy said. I smiled and replied, "Neither will you one day. Keep fighting. You are not forgotten." Every time I walked out of those shelters, I carried a sense of purpose no amount of money could buy. My father had left me wealth, but more importantly, he had left me the chance to turn my pain into something good. I spoke at schools, churches, community centers, telling my story so others would know what it means to lose everything and still keep going. People listened because they could see every word came from a place of truth. Now when I look back at the boy outside his home with a backpack and nowhere to go, I wish I could tell him what I know now. Hold on. The pain is real, but it will not last forever. You are stronger than you think, and your life has a purpose you cannot yet see. The night my stepfather threw me out, I thought my story was ending, but it was just beginning. Sometimes we are broken so we can be rebuilt stronger. Sometimes we are cast aside so we can learn how to stand on our own. And sometimes we are hidden because the world is not yet ready for who we are meant to become. I no longer carry anger as my fuel. I carry gratitude. Gratitude for my father's sacrifice, for my mother's fragile love, for Silas's loyalty, for my own refusal to give up. And to you listening now, I want to leave you with this. No matter how forgotten you feel, no matter how cruel the world has been, you are not worthless. You are not beyond hope. Your story is not finished. Thank you for staying with me through mine.